All right, so welcome everyone to our BBC session talking about the diversity leader and engage in reflective and reflexive practice for personal growth and cultural proficiency. And so, a few things we want to examine before I even get to the next slide is when we talk about engage in reflective and reflexive practice, we're talking about self examination. We're talking about ourselves. So this session is about us. It's about us as educational leaders, as about principals. I know we have principals in the room, we have vice principals in the room, we have senior teachers in the room, we have persons who are doing their degree in educational leadership and management. How do you lead in a diverse school as a diversity leader? What is your disposition? What is your role? What is your plan of action as you get into being and creating a more equitable, inclusive school or classroom? And so that begins. We take this from a point of self-reflection. So in this session, we want to clearly identify our personal characteristics and dimensions of diversity. We want to also articulate some of the dimension of difference that can be found in our community, right? We want to also look at the competencies of a diversity leader. We'll talk about that in follow-up BBC sessions. And we want to also evaluate. This is a powerful one. We want to evaluate. And when I said evaluate, I'm talking about self-evaluate our personal biases and prejudice that have impacted our views on understanding of otherness. And I want you to, from the outset, I want you to understand that we all have biases that we need to work on. We all have biases about, this idea of us and them has really impact us as educators. And when we as educators, when we have biases as educators, that impacts our students. It impacts our pedagogy, it impacts our practice, it impacts how we see certain students, right? And think about it. Think about your bias. Think about your bias. Who are you? Because who you are is guided by your, even also your likes, your dislikes, your physical capabilities, your physical abilities, your physical characteristics. But if you take a look, the arrows go out and they go in, and they go out for a reason. Because if you look at the diagram, if we look at the kind of the most popular dimensions of differences, they're so popular, is the physical abilities or qualities, right? Our gender is a big one for us, right? We talk about gender quite a bit. We talk about race plays an important part in many of our countries. Ethnicity and sexual orientation or identity, many of us, we are struggling with these when it comes to who we are and our identity. But if you look on the outside, on the outer side of the circle, you see so many other things that makes us different. Our educational level is a part of who we are. Our parental status is a part of who we are. A single parent is a different energy, is a different thing from a person who comes from a family, an extended family, or a nuclear family, or a same sex family. We're looking at our marital status, your income, your background, your religious background, your job classification, your socioeconomic status, your religious belief, all of these things is what makes you who you are and also make you different. It's an awareness of who you are. You are more. If I ask you who you are, many times when I ask this question, who are you? Person says, I'm a female, I am married, I am a teacher, I'm female, I'm married, I'm a school teacher. But you're more than that. Your age is a part of who you are. Your marital status, the kind of family you come from, your physical abilities and capabilities, your work background. Some of you in this class, you are teachers. But we also have vice principals in this class. We have principals in this class. Your whole belief system is impacted by your geographical location, your thinking style, all of this. And so it's important as a diversity leader for you to have awareness of what makes you different. Think about that. And be aware of your own bias and your prejudice. And then let me just say this, we all have our bias and prejudice. We all have. But we want to unpack them. We want to challenge them. We want to unwire ourselves from some of these things. Why? Because it impacts how you teach. And I want you to think about that for a minute. That these bias and prejudice you have and you hold, they impact how you teach. They impact which child gets attention. They impact how you deal with the parents. If you have prejudice against Rastafarian parents, we have seen that quite a bit in this course over the years. I've been teaching this course now for about 8 years, and I've seen that. I've heard many stories of what happens, how teachers will look at Rastafarian parents. We have looked at how teachers look at Muslim parents. We have looked at how teachers look at single parents. We have looked at how teachers look at parents who don't attend PTA meeting. We have certain assumptions about those parents. There are schools where children are treated different because of their socioeconomic status. Some of us as teachers, we are even guilty of teaching kids in a private school different from a public school. I'm sure that one is a big one for some of us, right? So we must examine those bias and privilege and prejudice that we have. And I did include the word privilege. Yes, be aware of your privilege as an educator. Be aware of your privilege as a teacher. Be aware of your privilege as a leader. Be aware of your privilege as a Christian, maybe in a Christian school. How do you use that? Examine your privilege and your power and think about your leadership. Be conscious of the differences around you. I remember when I gave the online poll the other day, and I said to students, have you ever felt discriminated against? And at the beginning of the school year, at the beginning of the semester, I should say, many persons would write, we have maybe 32% last time said no. And after a course like this, at the end of the course, when we did the post test, everybody said yes. And that was simple because so many of us, we are not conscious of the differences around us. We are so not conscious of the differences around us. Some of us, we don't know what discrimination looks like. We are unconscious to these things. As an educational leader, as a diversity leader, you need to be aware. You need to be aware what difference looks like. You need to be aware what marginalized look like, marginalization looks like. You need to be aware what oppression looks like in your school. You need to be aware of what the lack of social justice looks like in your school. So as a leader, that's your responsibility and awareness of yourself, but in an equation to others. And as the last thing we said here, be deliberate about inclusion. That's why you're doing a program like this. That's why you're doing a course like this. You want to be deliberate about your inclusive practices. You want to gain that cultural competence. You want to gain that cultural proficiency so you can engage with all our students. And when we talk about culture, we are not limiting ourselves. Let me go back again. We are not limiting ourselves to ethnicity and race. We're talking about all of this. And when we talk about cultural sensitivity, when we talk about cultural awareness, when we talk about cultural competence, we are talking about all the things that makes us different and all our intersectionality, all the elements and the dimensions that make us who we are. We're talking about all of that. And this is a quote that of course, I make it, so I like it. A firm acknowledgement of who we are, what we believe, the values we hold, the power and privileges we have, and the biases and prejudices that we hold will allow us to address concerning and conflicting issues within us. That's what we talk about first, not the school. Within us. Within us. Within us. It allows us to address the things within us. So we are better able to operate as a more inclusive leader. It allows us to use our cultural currency in intentional and deliberate ways in creating a more inclusive learning environment.